In a red state, we're going there too. But it seems that it's heavily Democrat. And what they've done is so sad. When you look at the Minnesota scam, a lot of it has to do with Somalia. Nobody's calling out anybody, but a lot of it has to do, but it's Somalia and plenty of others. And I believe the governor is complicit. I believe Ilhan Omar is complicit. I believe that your attorney general is complicit, and if they are, you're going to hopefully find out about it, and you're going to have to do what you have to do. If we found half of the fraud that's taking place in this country, and I think you have a chance of doing that, we would have much more than a balanced budget. That's the kind of numbers you're talking about. The theft is incredible, and I think JD will make and Andrew will make a charge later on that local states should handle nursing homes and all of these things that the federal government shouldn't be involved in. It's too big. The federal government should handle military and a couple of other things. But when it comes to nursing homes, you saw where a young gentleman was going around and knocking on doors and none of the nursing homes existed, none of the nurseries existed. The money that's being paid out, and the federal government pays for it. When you see all these people coming in illegally into our country, many criminals, many drug dealers, murderers, 11,888 murders, and you look at California, and more come in, and yet they never had money, and yet they pay them. You know why they pay them? Because the federal government is charged with paying. We're not paying them anymore, and I said that. So these two really smart guys are going to be, I think it's going to, hopefully it's going to be JD's. This will not be like a Kamala where she was put in charge of the border and she never went there, JD, right? You promise?
I promise, sir.
Remember, Kamala was put in charge. She was the border czar. She never went to the border. She never called any of the great Border Patrol. The Border Patrol testified. We never spoke to her in 4 years. And that was a disaster. But this is different. This is a different group of people. I think maybe before JD, I'll ask Stephen Miller to say a few words too, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, under President Trump's leadership, as we've seen, the illegal flow across the southern border was stopped completely. But what we found since President Trump came into office is that the Democrats have set up a system to funnel hundreds of billions and ultimately trillions of dollars to migrants that are in our country, oftentimes from places like Somalia. So as an example, ICE recently asked a group of illegal immigrants that were in detention whether or not they were receiving Medicaid. Half of them raised their hands and volunteered that they were on Medicaid. Just volunteered that. These aren't the ones who were hiding it, right? They also asked illegal aliens how they paid their medical bills, and they said that if they don't have Medicaid, they go to hospitals, they get free care there, and they bill it to the taxpayers. So they aren't paying for any of their own health care in this country. This is one example. And we've seen this over and over and over again. So under President Trump's leadership, and then of course with JD and the head of the FTC, Andrew Ferguson, we're going to see the first ever effort in American history to reclaim the ultimately trillions of dollars that were stolen from taxpayers. I believe, and I know President Trump believes, that when this theft is exposed, we will see that if all of it were stopped, it would be enough to balance the budget. The extraction of wealth from American taxpayers to people who don't belong here is the primary cause of the national debt, and this is the first ever effort to shut that down. Thank you, Mr. President.
First ever. And everyone knows they've been cheating for years. It's the first ever. And it's got to be stopped. I mean, it's got to be stopped. Think of it, Somalia is a third world, maybe a fourth world nation. One of the worst, one of the most dangerous. They don't have anything. They don't have councils. They don't have government. They don't have police. They shoot each other all over the place. They come here and they steal $19 billion. That's crazy. And Ilhan Omar, I hope this is part of it, but she married her brother, supposedly. I mean, there's a lot of documentation. That means she's here illegally and she's a congresswoman. And I hope you're going to be looking at that, or somebody is, all right? Because she's one of the ringleaders here. She's bad news, really bad news. She's so bad for our country. Anyway, JD, please say a few words.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Mr. President. This is a very important whole-of-government approach to tackle the fraud problem. And Let me just tell one story. One of the things that even before this executive order was signed that we were able to stop under the president's leadership is we saw evidence that in Minneapolis there were Somalis, primarily illegal immigrants, who were defrauding a Medicaid program that was meant to go to autistic children. So they were taking children who were supposed to get benefits, and they were claiming that their kids were actually autistic even though they weren't. And what did this mean? This meant two things. Number one, you had a lot of people getting rich off of the fraud while American citizens got poor. And the second thing that it meant is that you had autistic kids in Minneapolis, in suburban Minneapolis, who weren't getting benefits they needed because Somali fraudsters were literally stealing out of their pocket. It's got to stop. And unfortunately, that kind of fraud is one example of probably hundreds just within the state of Minneapolis, and then it's repeated and replayed all over the United States of America. When we first started talking about this problem, the president made it very clear he wanted us to take the fraud problem seriously because nobody had until he was president. We started to figure out one big hole that existed is that the agencies of the government weren't actually talking to each other. So Treasury would have evidence of financial fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Justice about it. Health and Human Services had evidence of Medicaid fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Treasury about it. So what this executive order does is force the entire apparatus of the federal government to do two things. Stop the fraud on the American taxpayer and make sure that the benefits that ought by right go to American citizens and not to fraudsters. Andrew Ferguson will be the vice chair and is going to do a great job. If you're curious what's the difference between the vice chair and the vice chair is going to do all the work and I'm going to take all the credit. Andrew.
Yeah, look, I mean, millions and millions of Americans pay into these programs every day, and they expect to get something out of it. And this fraud is just siphoning money that millions of Americans pay to fund their hospitals, to fund their daycare centers, into completely fake businesses. It isn't just unfair to all of us as taxpayers who pay for all this. It's particularly unfair to the Americans who need this the most and watch this money leave their hospital, leave their school system, and go out to fraud. And that is why this effort is so important. And I think we've just begun really looking at this, but I think that one of the things we're going to find is that in a lot of these agencies, the previous administration was pretty lax about existing anti-fraud controls, and we're going to expose that too.
I would take the word pretty out. I would change it with unbelievably lax. They weren't, it's not even lax. Lax isn't a good enough word. The previous administration was fraudulent, okay? And I think that's what you're going to find also. And you know, we worked so hard, like most favored nations drug prices. For years, people have wanted. We paid the highest drug prices anywhere in the world by far, by 5 times, 6 times, 10 times, more than London would be paying in New York, more than any city in Europe was paying than our cities. We would have a pill that would sell for $10 in Munich. In Germany, we sell for $10, and in New York it would be $130 or whatever. And we worked so hard, and we pulled it off. It's called Most Favored Nations. So now we went from by far the most expensive drugs anywhere in the world, prescription drugs, to the least expensive. And I had to get all the nations to agree, and I don't want to bore you with how I did it, but I did it. Everyone said it was impossible to do, including the drug companies. And we did it, and we worked so hard on it, and we're going to save so much money for the people. Your drug prices are going to be dropping at levels never even, by 50, 60, 70, 80% in some cases. But you work so hard, and then you see them stealing $19 billion. It's like in one pocket, out the other. And I think Andrew and JD, I think they have maybe one of the most important jobs. Maybe it could be one of the most important things that we're signing because I really believe that they have an opportunity to do something so good for our country. You know, people talk about balancing budgets. You can't balance a budget when people are stealing $19 billion and nobody's ever heard of anything like it. We had, I guess, in the same state, you went autism, where 4 or 5 years ago they spent $1 million. And now it's almost 400 million in just a few years. Well, autism didn't go up like that. And even the 1 million was probably a fraud. But it went from 1 million to almost 400 million in just a few years. These are crooked people. They basically said everybody in the state had autism. These are crooked, horrible people. And, you know, I was elected on, with JD, Make America Great Again. That was it. And we can't have this stuff happening.
Right.
We have to be respected. And they left. So I'm going to sign this. We'll take some questions, but let me sign this first before I don't forget. Let's see. Before I decide not to, okay?
Yes, sir.
I don't forget not to, but maybe I'll decide not to. I would decide not to. If I didn't think they could do the job, I would decide not to. But that'll be a terrible thing. I think they're going to find numbers, Andrew, I think you're going to find numbers that are far higher than you even think. And you know, Andrew came to us. He said, sir, he's read the stories about Minnesota. We know California is many times worse, but Minnesota is terrible. They're all terrible. Those cities are terrible. New York is terrible. What's going on in Chicago, Illinois, with that slob of a governor is terrible. And the kind of money we're talking about is just country changing. It's country changing money. It's having a deficit to having a really profitable country where you can lower your taxes substantially for people. And I think you have an opportunity to do it. And I think you two guys are the right guy. If you guys can't do it, we've got a problem, because nobody else will be able to do it.
Yes, sir.
So I'll sign, and then we'll take some nice questions from our wonderful media. Okay.
Good one.
Here you go. Very important. It's a big deal. We've been working on this very long. Really?
Yes,
See,
sir.
right? Will?
Yes, sir.
Andrew, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. President. You said during your State of the Union that this type of fraud, the corruption, is the type of thing that can shred the fabric of a nation. Why do you suppose then that leaders in recent memory haven't looked at the systemic amount of fraud
Because
that's
they're
taking
crooked.
place? And
Because they're crooked. They make money. They gain power. They use it for power. Like with the Somalians, they vote in a block, 100%. They make a deal with the Somalians. They all vote because they're on a gravy train. It's coming. It's money first, power second. A lot of people say power first. No, it's money first, power second. Do you ever see where, like, Mercedes? People come over from Somalia. They have no money, and now they're buying Mercedes-Benz cars. Okay, it's more cash goes out of the Minnesota airport than any other place in the world or so. We're going to find it. And Minnesota is really bad. The governor's corrupt. The attorney general is totally corrupt. Just like the New York State attorney general, Letitia James. She's a highly corrupt person. Bragg, the DA, is a corrupt person. They're all corrupt. These are corrupt people. And we got too many of them in our country. And we have to expose them, and we have to catch them. And if these two guys can't, these are high IQ people. I've always liked high IQ. These are high IQ people. If they don't do it, we're going to go a long way, fellas, to find somebody else that's going to. We have no choice. If honestly, and they may not do a good job. If they don't do a good job,
Thank you, sir.
no, it's possible. If they don't do a good job, the country's sort of in trouble. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Two questions for the
And I
Vice
think they're
President.
going to do a great job. Go ahead.
First, Mr. Vice President, Democrats are already calling you the fraud czar. What's your reaction to that title? And then
Good title.
given
I like
your
it.
past skepticism of foreign adventurism, are you completely on board with the current war in Iran?
So I like fraud czar. It's certainly what we're going to do. And look, we have to do it. As the president said, this is a problem that has festered in this country for far too long, and far too few people have actually wanted to do anything about it. That's what makes this administration different, is that we actually tackle the problems the American people have been confronting. So I'm very happy about it. And look, I think that I know what you're trying to do, Phil. You're trying to drive a wedge between members of the administration, between me and the president. What the president said consistently, going back to 2015, and I agreed with him, is that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. We have taken this military action under the president's leadership. I think all of us, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, should pray for its success and pray for the safety of our troops. That's the approach that I've taken. Make it as successful as possible.
So there's no hesitation, given your past statements, with the current operation?
What do you mean there's no hesitation with my
On your
past
part,
statements?
Given your skepticism of foreign adventurism, you were a critic of the global war on terror previously.
Well, I think one big difference, Phil, is that we have a smart president, whereas in the past we've had dumb presidents. And I trust President Trump to get the job done, to do a good job for the American people, and to make sure that the mistakes of the past aren't repeated. Absolutely.
Thanks, sir.
Look, JD's been great, but here's the simple thing, and I have, some people, I don't want wars. I want wars less than almost anybody. Peace through strength. But you know what? I've watched Iran for a long time. I've called them out 20 years ago when I was a civilian that liked watching the world. And they're violent, vicious people. The leadership, violent, vicious people. They killed 32,000 protesters over the last 3 weeks. They put out a memo 2 days ago saying, if you protest, we will shoot you and kill you in the streets. And somebody said, oh, there's not that many protests. Well, first of all, there are bombs going off all over the place. But even if there weren't, who's going to do that? Who's going to do it? They don't have any guns, and the other ones have latest in line machine gun, right? And every form of gun you can have. They shoot them right through the middle of the head. They're violent people. If they had a nuclear weapon, they would use it. And sometimes I'll have some of the people that, feel very strongly, like I do about wars. And I say, do you think Iran is violent, and do you think their people are violent? Yes, leadership. Do you think they should have a nuclear weapon, which is massive power? I don't even want to discuss how powerful, because it's depressing. And they said, no, they shouldn't have. Definitely they shouldn't have. I said, and you don't want to fight war? No, we don't want to fight war. So these are naive people that frankly are stupid. If you believe that Iran should have a nuclear weapon, there's something wrong with you, because they would use it the only question is within 1 hour if they get it, or 1 day. They will use it, and they will blow up the entire Middle East, not just Israel. They'll start with Israel, but they will blow up. And you got to see that when they unexpectedly started sending missiles to every country within 1,000 miles of them. I mean, they're blowing up countries that were neighbors, not necessarily some friends. They actually were blowing up some friends. They were blowing up the people that handle their accounts. They're sending thousands of missiles into countries that didn't expect to be in the war, because they wanted to take over the Middle East. And if I didn't terminate Barack Hussein Obama's horrible Iran nuclear deal, which I did in my first term, one of the dumbest deals, perhaps the dumbest deal because of the danger involved, you would have had them have a nuclear weapon 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. They would have used it, blown up the Middle East, and they would have then come after us. And if these gorgeous B-2 bombers, give me that bomber, Andrews. Let me just hug that little sucker. Give me that bomber over there. Thank you. You knew immediately which one. This looks small, but in person it's very big. Because it's the only plane capable of carrying a 200,000-pound bomb. So I don't know how they do it, because it's very sleek and nice, but it carries a lot of weapons and there's a lot of bombs. But had I not sent this incredible machine, times numerous others, to hit Iran at midnight with no moon, dead dark, every single bomb was dropped right down the chute that it was supposed to hit. How they do it, who knows? Nobody else can figure. No other country can do it. No other country has our military or even close. And I think we've probably proven that with Venezuela and now with because we have done a number on Iran. But if I didn't do that, if I didn't decimate, I call it their nuclear dust, they would have had a nuclear weapon within 1 month after that bombing took place. And they would have used it on first Israel and then the Middle East. And you know that because all of those missiles that were launched against their neighbors were set long ago long before they knew they would be using them this quickly. Had we not done this, you would have had a nuclear war that would have evolved into World War III. And more important, this is a war that there would have been nothing left. So we've done a great thing. The people that say it's okay for a very sick ideology, a very sick country in terms of its leadership, very good people, great people. But the people that say that, I think they're actually, they're either evil or they're stupid. So if you believe that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, they should not have it, then you have to absolutely love what I've done, because in 2 weeks we have decimated them. They have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft weapons, they have no leadership. The leadership is gone. But then they set up a new leadership to go and name a new leader, and that leadership is gone. And now they think maybe the sun is gone. They're all gone. My biggest problem is I have no idea who we're talking to, because nobody ever heard of any of these people. They're all dead. But we did a job for the world, not a job for us, for the whole world. We took the worst country in 50 years and maybe longer from the ideological standpoint, a country that wanted to blow up the world, a country that is sick, and it has a religious fervor. And when you add religion, you know, people don't realize more people died in religious wars than every other war put together. And that's what you would have had here. And it was a terrible thing. I'm very proud of what we did. And I think JD understands better than most. If you give Iran a nuclear weapon, at least a very substantial part of the world would be blown up. And it'll be used almost immediately. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You don't mind if I keep this here, do you? Isn't that a beautiful thing? You know, I used to look at it, and I said, it's a piece of art, but how can it be effective? It's so stealth. Think of it, Peter. 1 in the morning, it flies in, and they say, sir, they're in Iranian airspace. And I say, oh, and I'm watching it from the Situation Room with a couple of other very smart people, including some good generals, real generals, not television generals. And all of a sudden you see that dive, they start diving, and sure, and you see him 30,000, 20,000. Boy, I said, that was a lot. They went down fast to aim it. And they know they're coming, and they're smart, and they never saw them. And they're firing a little bit, but they don't know what they're firing at because they can't see a thing. And then you hear the biggest explosions that anybody's ever heard. Those are the biggest bombs. Outside of nuclear, those are the biggest bombs. And you say, what technology we have. What a great country. I built it, largely, I built it during my first term. I built it. I didn't know I'd have to use it this much in my second term. But we had an incompetent president. We had an incompetent administration. And if that group of people in any form, whether it's Kamala, him, it doesn't matter, would have had another 4 years, we would have had no country left. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You say you're doing a job for the rest of the world. In your conversations with your counterparts, are they thanking you? What are their conversations like when you talk about this military conflict that's taking place in Iran?
Well, they should be thanking me, because many of them get 90%. China, as an example, should be thanking us, but I don't expect to thank you, but they should be thanking us. Japan gets 95%, China 91%. Many of the countries, South Korea gets a tremendous percentage of their oil and therefore their energy from the Straits, or as they call it, the Strait. And they should be not only thanking us, they should be helping us. What does surprise me is that they're not eager to help. There are a couple. We'll be announcing some names soon. There are some that really were right up front. I would announce their name now, other than maybe they prefer it not being announced for whatever reason. I will say this: it's a lot easier to get people today than it was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, before we destroyed before we obliterated the country, before we took out, because they're down to about 8% of their missiles. They're down to a small portion of their drones. And we've demolished many of their factories where they make the missiles and the drones, and the rest are all following. Our military has been amazing. We hit Cork Island, took out every single thing in Cork Island except one thing. We left the pipes, because if we take out the pipes, it takes a long time to build them. And at some point, something is going to happen that's positive with respect to those pipes. But there are some countries that greatly disappointed me. And you know, I'm the one that got them to pay from 2% to 5% of GDP, NATO. And I get along great with those countries in NATO, but I always said, you know, the problem with NATO is we'll always be there for them, but they'll never be there for us. And when I hear the UK, which was sort of considered the Rolls-Royce of allies, right? When you say they were the oldest and they were going to be there, and I say it would be really helpful if you'd send over a couple of ships, and if you have some minesweepers, which they do, it'd be very helpful. And the Prime Minister is a nice man. I think he's a very nice guy. He says, well, I'd like to ask my team. I said, you don't have to worry about a team. You don't have a team. You're the Prime Minister. You can make a decision. Well, I have to speak to my people. I said, you don't have to speak to anybody. So it's very disappointing. And then after we obliterated them and destroyed their military, the whole thing, and it became a much safer zone, he said, we're going to send over 2 aircraft carriers. I said, I don't want them anymore. I don't want them after we win. I want them before we start. I don't need your aircraft carriers after we've already won. So, you know, those things are very disappointing. And you have to remember, we have 45,000 troops in Japan. We have 45,000 troops in South Korea. We have 45,000, 50,000 troops in Germany. We defend all these countries. And then, do you have any minesweepers? And they say, well, would it be possible for us not to get involved? I've been saying it for a long time. This is the greatest thing to come out of this. We spend trillions and trillions of dollars on NATO to defend other countries. And I always said, but if it ever comes time to defend us, they're not going to be there. Many of them would not be there. And we're going to have to start thinking more wisely in this country. Some have been very good. 1 or 2 have been great. I'll tell you who the great ones are at the right time.